Kevin Durant was joined by Draymond Green on his podcast. And Durant said the two were simply exchanging texts about what had occurred in the 2016 NBA Finals, which the Warriors lost to LeBron's Cavaliers, but never considered to be a sense of urgency on Draymond's end about getting him to sign with the Warriors in the offseason. This was Draymond's perspective on what actually happened.
It was this whole narrative of like, you call Kevin crying from the parking lot. I'm like, yo, this can be like, y'all added a theatrical sense to make this movie. Like, you gotta make TV. You gotta add on a little bit. So like people just start pouring on, bro. But I wasn't about to come out and fight it. Like at the end of the day,
it was just
however y'all think Kevin got here. That's what your mind road. What helps you out.
Go with it. And also, this for OKC fans. They thought me and Dre was hanging out, literally like chilling with each other during the conference finals. And when I heard that, I was like, "No, who y'all think I am? Who you think Draymond would hang out with me during the conference finals, like over my house? Like, come on, stop the."
Exactly.
That's Kevin Durant and Draymond Green. Look, I have said this time and again, and I think this story gives it validity, which is it's fair for everyone to point out that Kevin Durant needed a title. We need to see him in a championship level competition in order to validate all of the previous successes. And would you prefer to be in Oklahoma City? Of course. Of course. But there was a sense that they were topping out, right? Like Westbrook was Westbrook, and there just was a limit to how much growth was there. And Kevin Durant, I'm sure, was frustrated. In that exact same year, when they were up 3-1, the Warriors were essentially guarding him with two guys. They're playing a zone on two players for the Thunder because they just didn't have enough shooting on their team. But this is what I've said, and I think that podcast actually validates it, which is, yes, Durant needed the Warriors, but the Warriors needed Durant just the same, if not more so. Remember, Harrison Barnes was the fifth starter on that 73-win team that lost to the Cavs in the finals, and Durant essentially replaced him, and of course they had to scrap the bench in order to make it work financially. Now, I don't know how you look at it. I saw them win two titles. I think they win a third title. If Durant is healthy, we'll never know. But there are some people that, well, it wasn't a success. Like, what do you mean? They played LeBron the next 2 years in the championship and won it. And the guy who was the better player on the floor for the length of the NBA Finals was, in fact, Kevin Durant. Same position. So it was a success by anybody's estimation. 2 championships, a third NBA Finals, and then injuries led to them losing in 6 to the Toronto Raptors. They had stunning success. But the other thing it says is what all successful businesses and successful people know is that you evolve or perish. Right? Evolve or perish. And that's what the Warriors figured out. And here's the other part to that exact same story that I don't know if people remember. After winning that title, coming from 3-1 down, the Cleveland Cavaliers and LeBron James reportedly had interest in Chris Paul as their point guard. Remember, Kyrie Irving was like 24 at the time. He just played magnificent basketball, hit the big shot in Game 7 in the NBA Finals, and LeBron's like, yeah, we might want to upgrade. Why? Because LeBron operates by the same premise, which is evolve or perish. Evolve or perish. Yes, the Warriors, Kevin Durant needed the Warriors. He needed to compete for a championship. He needed to win a championship in order to solidify his legacy as one of the all-time great players. But let it be known, and it's pretty obvious, the Warriors needed Kevin Durant. They were very, very good without him. They needed to evolve or they would perish. The league was catching up to them. And they needed one more player. They needed a game changer. They needed somebody who could take over and just win them a game and win them a series. That was Kevin Durant, and that's what they got. And if you think it's a sign of weakness that they would reach out after winning 73 games and losing in the NBA Finals, after nearly losing the Western Conference Finals, remember they were down 3-1 in that deal. If you think that's a sign of weakness, then you're completely avoiding all of the different metaphors to life, metaphors to business, metaphors even to sports business in terms of you got to keep getting better, because if you're not getting better, frankly, you're getting worse. John Hollinger joins us, a columnist for The Athletic, and of course, he used to work with the Memphis Grizzlies in their front office, and he joins us on the Doug Gottlieb Show on Fox Sports Radio. John, let's start with the old story that won't kind of go away, which is Draymond recruiting Kevin Durant, and my net is a little different than other people. Like, I truly believe that they had topped out with Harrison Barnes and that the league was catching up to them and that they had to evolve. We operate under this kind of national assumption that Kevin Durant needed the Warriors, which is probably true, but the Warriors needed Kevin Durant equally. Is that a fair statement to make?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely a fair statement to make, because, I mean, you saw actually in those playoffs that, I mean, Oklahoma City had them down 3-1, right? And they didn't glide through those playoffs quite so easily. And I do think the league was getting more aware just of how to deal with when it's just Steph and Clay on the perimeter, how to deal with that. And then once they added Durant on top of that, that was when it was really like, okay, we have no way to deal with this at all. Like, this is completely overwhelming. So yeah, I think that's totally fair to make that statement. They actually lost in these Golden State years all run together for me. They actually lost in the finals that year to Cleveland too, of course, before Durant signed.
I know that it's and even to the point of continuing getting better. That was after that series. LeBron James wanted to add Chris Paul instead of Kyrie Irving, right? So everybody wants to get better. Nobody wants to just run it back and stay the same.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, it was the obvious move for the Warriors to make, and of course that big surge in the cap that year sort of made it possible. So it was a little bit. I think it still caught the rest of the league a little unawares in terms of everyone sort of knew it was possible, but I don't think anyone was quite banking on that being the eventual outcome. So that definitely sent a little shockwave through the league at that time.
That's the voice of John Hollinger. He's kind enough to spend some time with us here. Doug Gottlieb Show, Fox Sports Radio. Let's work through the league currently. Are you a buyer into the Nets in the playoffs?
I am. I think they're just going to be so good on offense that it's going to be really hard for other teams to deal with. They don't match up well against bigger players in particular. So Joel Embiid, Giannis Antetokounmpo, yeah, those guys are going to be a real problem for them. But they might be able to beat those teams 135 to 125. I mean, they just have so much offensive talent right now between Harden, Durant, and Kyrie. And then you have Joe Harris as your fourth option, who's a money shooter that you can't leave half an inch of distance. I mean, it's almost unfair at times.
Did we lose him? I think there we go. I think we're getting back. Do we try and work to get him back, guys? Did I hear a click and a disconnect? I think I did. John Hollinger, our guest in the Doug Gottlieb Show. Okay. So you are a buyer. Who would be in the East the most competitive opponent in the playoffs? The team that you think they would match up the worst with?
I flip-flop back and forth on that between Philadelphia and Milwaukee, but I would probably say Milwaukee, because the Bucks, now that they have PJ Tucker, they can play five smalls on the court and switch everything a little more easily. They can try to match them with Brook Lopez if they want, but I think the Nets also don't really have anybody on their team who can guard Giannis, and it's not as easy to double him as when he's attacking you from the perimeter as it is to, say, double-team Joel Embiid when he catches on the block and then you run guys at him. So I think Milwaukee's going to be a little bit tougher matchup there, but I also like a second-round series between Milwaukee and Philadelphia. Like, wow, like sign me up for that too.
Yeah, I'm with you. LeBron says he's coming back. What will the Lakers look like when they're all healthy?
I mean, I think we saw the first half of this year that they're a really good defensive team, but there's not a lot of shooting. And you wonder, last year kind of everything broke the right way for them, and that's not necessarily guaranteed to happen again. They might end up in the sixth position by the time the playoffs start, where you're looking at having to go through, play the Clippers in the first round, basically, and then you won't have home court, whatever home court is worth this year, which seems like it'll be worth something now that fans are back. You won't have that in any playoff round. So they're definitely facing an uphill climb, I would say at this point. I mean, there's definitely still the respect there for, okay, they did this last year, they have most of the same players, but just feels like it's going to be much more of a grind for them.
What do you think of the Clippers? We saw like the best of playoff Rondo last night, but the Clippers, in terms of what was missing last year, have they fixed it for this year?
I think we don't really know yet. I mean, they've kind of shown the same inconsistency through the regular season that they did a year ago. The peak version of this team still looks really good. They have the ability to match up big or small, depending on the opponent. They have a lot of different ways they can line up against you. They have a ton of shooting. And then Kawhi Leonard, obviously, in the postseason, has proven to be a killer. So they have all the pieces. And you look back at that Denver series, it's still one of the most confounding ends to a playoff series I've ever seen, because the Clippers just completely fell off a cliff offensively in the second half of all three games after they were winning all three of them. And I struggle to come up with a rational explanation for what happened. So I think because of that, there's always going to be a lingering doubt about this team until they prove it in June.
Yeah, I think so as well. Like, that's the Clippers are having to beat ghosts, not having to just beat opponents, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
so
totally.
so then we have Denver, who, I mean, a ton of offensive weaponry. Utah, who probably the best team, but people don't believe in Mitchell being the type of superstar that can carry them when they need a superstar. You have Phoenix, and I think it's Devin Booker's a superstar, and now you have Chris Paul and his leadership and his experience. Okay, if not the Clippers or the Lakers, then who?
I think Utah. I mean, the extent to which they're smoking people right now is like, you have to take that seriously. I mean, they're like on a season-long heat check, basically. They just have so much shooting. They go basically 8 deep with real quality, which that will be their exact playoff rotation, basically. And yeah, I think, at the highest end, like, Mitchell as a one-on-one player isn't quite on the level of some of these other guys that are the frontline names on other teams. But you go through the roster, and Utah, their third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh best player are all better than yours. And so Utah doesn't have to put it all on Mitchell's shoulders. I think the one thing that I think they probably struggle with a little is they don't have a great matchup for some of those big wings who are on the ball. When you talk about a LeBron or a Kawhi Leonard, because they're probably looking at, like, putting a Joe Ingles on somebody like that, which isn't great. I mean, you have Rudy Gobert waiting for him at the rim, obviously, which helps. But that's the one thing that I think makes people a little leery beyond just, is Mitchell an elite one-on-one player in a playoff game? It's more, can they defensively be as good as they were in the regular season when they have to deal with some of these bigger wings? Because they're 1 through 4. They're a pretty small team.
They are a pretty small team. It's actually very, very interesting. Interesting to look at how they have kind of morphed and blended their size. And you think because of Gobert they're so big, and then you look at the rest of the roster like, oh, they're not. They don't have that. But it also allows them kind of versatility lineup wise. Doug Gottlieb Show here on Fox Sports Radio. I feel like the MVP thing, was it big when we were kids? Yeah. But a lot of it has become bigger because it's just a reason to pay some attention to the regular season. That said, Giannis hasn't been as dominant as he had been previously. LeBron's been hurt. Pretty much everybody, Joel Embiid got hurt. Anybody who's been in that discussion seemingly has gotten hurt. Where are you in the MVP of the league?
I mean, to me, it's Nikola Jokic. I mean, it's his award at this point. So unless he just face plants these last 6 weeks, I think he's going to be the MVP. To me, it's getting to the point where it's not even that close. In terms of, he's been absolutely elite in terms of performance. His team is winning, and he's been the one guy who's been able to stay on the court for all his team's games of kind of those top level elite players. So I think it's got to be Jokic. I mean, Giannis has had another good year. I think there's some fatigue with voting for him, certainly. And I'm not sure he's been quite as dominant as he was the last 2 seasons, nor have the Bucks. Embiid's been really good, but he's only played 33 games. And then you kind of get into the next level of guys where you're like, okay, Damian Lillard and Steph Curry have been awesome, but their teams are further down in the standings. So I think it's Jokic.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. What should the Warriors do in the offseason?
Well, that depends on how big a check they're willing to cut, because they are, I mean, for them to really go all in with this group at this point requires a absolutely staggering luxury tax bill to be paid next year. So, it's a really interesting dilemma, because they got this huge contract for Klay Thompson, who hasn't played a game in 2 years now, and is going to be coming off an Achilles and an ACL. They got Wiggins making huge money to be an okay player, right? Draymond Green, I think, he's still good, but he's definitely on the downslope compared to what he used to be. And so to just run it back with those guys, I don't know where that gets you. They could have a very high pick coming from Minnesota. It's top 3 protected, and the Wolves have been horrible this year. And they have an interesting trade asset in James Wiseman if they want to go that direction, because I think he has clear talent, but also he's not good enough to help a good team win right now. And so if they really want to go in on all that and push their chips in, I think they could take the pick, take Wiseman, take maybe one other contract, and see what stars are out there on the market this summer, and try to put one more guy around Steph, Klay, and Draymond, because otherwise they're just going to be this again, right? Where it's Curry's doing amazing magical stuff, but there isn't enough help around him, and they're just kind of languishing around 500.
But doesn't that change if we just don't know what Klay's going to be like, right? I don't know. A year and a half removed and 2 catastrophic injuries removed, you don't know what he's going to be like. And then you wonder, all right, how much can James Wiseman improve from year 1 to year 2? Can that all come together? Meanwhile, you're going to have some reasonable aging with Draymond and Steph.
Yeah, and you remember, I mean, even with those guys in the finals against Toronto, I mean, they still were. I mean, Toronto was better. They had the upper hand, and so. You just wonder what the ceiling is with this group now, 2 years later, unless they bring in some real reinforcements.
John Hollinger. John, great stuff, man. Love your work. Even enjoy catching up with you and talking to you even more. Thanks so much for joining us on Fox Sports Radio.
Thanks for having the show, Doug.